Welcome to my pantry. This is where I keep the essentials that save me time, money, and stress every day. Today I'm taking you on a full tour to show you how I organize everything to make meal prep and grocery shopping a breeze. And stick around until the end because I'll share my top pantry tip that has saved me hours in the kitchen. And if you're a busy mom looking for ways to simplify family life, then you're in the right place. So let's get going. Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to Systematic Mama. A well-organized pantry is the backbone of an efficient kitchen. In this video, I'll show you my setup, share my organizing tips, and give you ideas to make the most of your own pantry space. In this house, we have a corner pantry in the kitchen, and we only moved into this house in the summer, so we've only been here a few months, and we've lived in many different houses, and so you can organize your your any space. And these are just going to be some ideas for you to help you in whatever space that you have. So we're going to start in the top corner over here. And up here, I just have some containers that if I'm making bread, I fill up those bins with the dry ingredients for my bread mixes. And I'm currently not making a lot of bread because we're just not eating a lot of that right now. But I do have my muffin mixes here that are done up with the dry ingredients. And then all I have to do is dump those in a bowl with the wet ingredients and I can mix up muffins really quickly. I have the Instant Pot sitting up here because I don't use it a lot, but I do use it. So it's just on the high shelf. And then I have paper towels up there. And I also have some Thrive things that I use a lot, like all the time. And they're very light, so that's why they're up on the top shelf. And then over here I have some paper goods like paper plates and napkins and plastic cutlery and things like that. If we're, having barbecue or things like that outside that I might need this for, then it's just easy for me to grab. And then starting down on this next shelf is where I have a lot of my pantry containers that I empty things into. So I've got, and I try to keep things together. So I've got some nuts there, different dried fruits, protein mixes and drink mixes, and then some dried beans and potatoes and cornmeal. And the cornmeal I don't use as often, so that's why it's in the back corner. I try to keep things that I use all the time in accessible and easy to reach. And then in here I have a Lazy Susan. I got this at the dollar store, and then it just gonna keep stuff that we like to use for, toast or pancakes. And then here I've got some cereal bins, and I need to make granola. That's why they're mostly empty. So I usually have chocolate granola and regular granola, and then just some rice cereal, and then some crackers and snacks for the kids. And then over here on the wall, I actually have the kids' kitchen duties chart, and I'll explain this in another video sometime, but that lives here in the pantry wall. And then down here on this next shelf, and this is like flours and baking items and oatmeal and things. And then I have a couple of bins here that don't match just because I was given those for free. I would like to get some more with the red lids, so I need to go to the store and do that. And then in the corner here, I've got some glass jars that are from IKEA, and they're really tall, and so they fit my spaghetti and fettuccine really well. And then behind that is some more pastas. And then on this shelf, some rice and more pasta. And I'm out of marshmallows, so I need to grab some of those. And a lot of baking items here, so that's a lot of this shelf. And then the next shelf down is, like in this corner one, I keep lighters and matches, things for like candles and barbecue, stuff like that. Canning jar lids, and also for fermenting, so my little weights for that. And then any baking mixes that I have mixed up at the time go in here. And then I keep a few onions and garlic in here. Most of them stay down in the cold room. And then in the corner is some other baking items in that bin. And then these are items that I don't use a lot, so that's why they're down here, that I don't grab for a lot, but I do use them for baking. And then over here, some tortillas, and then if I had a loaf of bread for the kids, it would be sitting with this as well. And then some oatmeal packets and hash browns and just a few snack things and drink mixes. And then on the wall kind of beside that, I have a drying rack that there's 3 of these and they fold out. And so I've got a couple of drying mats drying here, and then a couple of cloths here drying. And so that's kind of nice because then they're not cluttering up the kitchen and they have a home and they just can live right there and dry until the next time I need them. And then down on the floor, I have some distilled water jugs because I like to use that in my coffee maker and my kettle so it doesn't build up with any calcium or things that have to be cleaned. And then some bubbly because we like to drink sparkling water. And then in this basket is an overflow bin, and it's so that like I have a bag of sugar and some pasta and things in there that didn't quite fit all in the container when I opened a bag. And so those go in there so they have a home. And then over here is some baskets, and this is mostly baking things, so cookie cutters and stuff to decorate cakes and cookies. And I don't get to that all of the time, but when I do, I can just go ahead and grab one of those bins. And then this is my grain mill in the box because I usually get this out about once a month and grind grain, so that's there. And then next to that is just a step stool. Everyone in my family is taller than me except for my youngest daughter, and so sometimes it's handy to have a stool for me and her to reach the things in the higher cupboards. And then I have a couple of command hooks here so that I can keep aprons, and I also have a fly swatter and a broom here, so those can live on those hooks, and that way everyone has a home. So that is just a quick tour of our pantry in the kitchen, and then I'm going to take you downstairs and I'll show you the rest of the pantry. So downstairs we have a storage room that I'm going to show you, and this is where we keep most of our overflow pantry items, and then at the one end of it we have a cold room, so I'm going to show you that as well. So in here we have some wire racks here that we've gotten from Costco, and they actually are on wheels and they roll around and they actually hold a lot of weight. So these are really fantastic. And one of the places that we lived didn't even have a pantry. And so I bought this and kind of had it sitting in the side of the kitchen. And this is where I had my pantry. And so you can organize any space that you have. And up in those white bins up there, those are some overflow and extra first aid items like bandages and band-aids and things like that. And then I have some lunch kits up there, so if we go on picnics or the kids need some, they're up there. And I also have an ice cream maker up there, and there's a box with a butter churn and cheese press in it. We used to have goats and we'd milk goats and we made cheese and butter and yogurt and all the things. So I'm still hanging on to that stuff because someday I would like to have goats again and be able to do that. Down here I have candy molds because I rarely use those, but when I do use them, I want to have them. And then I have a bin next to that of some coffee flavorings that I used to use with pumps, and I'm going to make some coffee flavorings and then just reuse those bottles because they're really great. A couple of water jugs in case I need that if we're having, a barbecue or a picnic or something and I want to fill those up with water or maybe some juice. And then a basket over here that I have all the materials to make fire starters and also some pre-made fire starters. In our last home that we just moved from, we had a wood stove, and so we used fire starters all the time. Now we're only using it for, backyard fire pit or camping right now, but we still like to have those because it's really convenient. And then on the next shelf, I've got a bunch of pepper and salts, and next to that is decaf coffee and regular coffee. These are some extra tortillas, and then right there is some apple cider mix. And then over here is hot cocoa, and I have a lot of these because Costco had them on sale kind of at the beginning when it started turning cold here. And so I bought hopefully enough to last the year because they won't go on sale again probably for a year. And in the winter, my kids drink 1 cup of hot cocoa a day. And then in the summer, if we're camping, they like to have a cup of hot cocoa. And so everything is kind of organized by category because this is all like the drinks. So down here is 2 bins of tea. So a variety of different teas, and the only one is labeled because that's the one I want the kids to take from. And then the other bin is like newer. And so that's how I rotate them. And then right here is coffee packets. Again, we like to put those in our MREs that we make, and we also like to bring those camping. So we have some of those. And again, I try to buy all of this on sales. And then instant coffee here, I've got regular instant coffee and decaf instant coffee. And then down here, I have 2 bins of vitamins. and supplements, things that we take. And then over here is some, for pain medicine and different things, and also prescriptions. So that's where those live. And then down here, I've got a bin of Jell-O and a bin of pudding and some parchment paper and some oven liners because they don't fit in any of my bins. They're too long. And then those are some cartridges for my SodaStream because I do use that quite often. And then that's my Yogurtherm to make yogurt with, and a humidifier if I need it, if someone is sick. And then I actually have 2 bread makers. And when I am making bread a lot, then I do use the bread makers, and I use those bins that you saw in the other pantry, and I fill those up with the mix. So it makes it really quick to throw loaf in. And then I've got a second one of these bins or wire shelves because they're really convenient to use, and they fit a lot of stuff and hold a lot of weight. And on that top shelf up there, I've got extra like Ziploc containers. So if I need to give a meal or something to somebody, and then basket coffee filters because those are really great for filtering water, and tablecloths. So I usually try to keep one of each kind of color. So if I'm having any kind of party or birthday or gathering, I can just come down here and grab those. I get those at the dollar store. And then napkins and cups and straws. And then right here is a bit of foil pans. And then there's large Ziploc bags. And I have one extra that's just not fitting in my bin right now. And so that's why it's sitting there in front. And this is a bin of spices. And most of those spices are in there in jars that we grew ourselves. And even calendula flowers to make ointment for cuts and things. And then down here is coffee filters that we use in our coffee maker. And stevia, because I use that to sweeten my coffee, and saran wrap, and then foil and wax paper. So this is all the, paper goods, you can tell, and sandwich bags and plastic cutlery, and then snack bags and medium freezer bags. So this is all, kitchen like storage kind of thing, paper goods. And then down here in these clear bins, I have gravy mixes. So a variety of kinds like turkey and beef, and then bouillon and onion soup mix is in that one, and then baking soda and baking powder. And then over here is yeast and cornstarch. And then down here I've got 2 bins of spices, and we actually keep a microwave here on the shelf because we have a power outlet right there. And so we don't really use a microwave for very much. So that's why we have it down here. But I do let the kids have some microwave popcorn. And every once in a while we will, microwave or melt butter, something like that. But very rarely, because when I warm up leftovers, I just do it in the oven or on the stove for everybody because there's so many of us. And also there's a lot of negative things with using a microwave. And then down here, we've got table salt there, and then another one right below it. And then in all these 3 bins is pickling salt. And the one on the right here is labeled because it's the oldest, and that's the one that we use first. So we use right to left, and that's how I keep it organized. And then down here on the bottom is where I keep some distilled water jugs. And then coming over to this next section, on the very top shelf is where I keep all of our freeze-dried foods because it's light, and so it's easy to get down off this top shelf. And so we have a variety, and I do have them organized. So the far corner is like the gluten-free flour and grains, and then it's, all by their different categories, so fruits and veggies. And then I do have just a couple of bags of some dried apples that I picked up at Costco one day. But I do have 2 different kinds of Thrive apples. They are amazing. And then down on these next shelves is where we have our great big totes. And these are quite heavy, so I usually get my husband or my boys to help me lift them. And so I use every little space I have. So you can tell that up here I've got things of toilet paper. And this is something that I've always, kept a lot of, just because there's a lot of us and I don't like to run out of things, especially things like that. So these 2 bins are actually oatmeal, and I've never had an issue with moisture or bugs or anything. They're in their bags inside there, and we rotate them inside the bins in a certain way, and everyone knows how that works. And the totes just keep them nice and sealed from moisture and bugs. And then this one here is ramen noodles. And this one is some powdered milk. And then down on the next shelf, they're shorter bins, but they're stacked too high. So these two here are pastas. And then in between, I do have just sitting on the shelves some microwave popcorn so that the kids can use that in the microwave that's sitting right there. And then that top bin is more baking items, chocolate chips, nuts, coconut, things like that. And then dry beans and lentils in that bin. And then over here, they're stacked on top of each other, and it's 2 bins of sugar. So white sugar, brown sugar, icing sugar. And then next to that is 2 bins of rice, and that is white rice, and we rotate through that. And then down here on the very bottom, I actually have these on little wooden, almost like skateboards. We have little wheels that we put on them, and it's so that I can very easily slide these out without scratching the floor. And I mean, it is just a concrete painted floor, but it just makes it a lot easier. So I've got buckwheat and barley and rye in that bin. And they're just in their grain sacks, and then they're inside those totes. So I've never had a problem with anything. And this one is brown rice and cornmeal. And the brown rice I like to use to grind, actually, to make gluten-free bread. And then over here, I've got a bin of soft white wheat. And then that far bin is hard red wheat. And then down here, we had enough space to keep just a small extra fridge. We couldn't fit a full-size fridge here, but this fridge works quite nicely. And on top, I have a bin with mostly emergency in there. So I use every square inch, and someday if I feel like I'll build some shelves to go above this if I feel like I need it, because I do have a little bit of space there. And this fridge mostly holds extra like dairy, so cheese and eggs and yogurt and milk and egg whites. And there's some cream cheese, and down there's some lunch meat. So it just mostly holds all of that kind of overflow. And then the kids can run down here for me and grab a brick of cheese if I need it or whatever upstairs. And then across from all of this is where I have my amazing can sorters. So on top, I keep paper towels because they're light and they can just live up there. And then I love these can sorters because I can customize the sizes, so whatever cans I want to have. And then I have them labeled. And so the sections that aren't labeled are the extras of that thing. So like right here, I've got 3 spaces for diced tomatoes. So the kids know that they can come and grab this one. I don't know what happened to this label, but so that's where the kids would grab from. And so it makes it really convenient for me to put, the thing I just buy in here, and then we're using the oldest thing. And so there's never a question of, what's oldest and newest. And I have this in categories mostly. This is fruits. And then here is more is pie fillings and fruit. And this is some milks and fruit. And then on the lower one is vegetables. And then up over here is tomato products. So diced tomatoes and tomato sauce and tomato paste and pizza sauce. And then this is mostly all beans, like canned beans. And then I have some coconut cream in there because it's just whatever fits. And you can see that I even have really skinny things. So like green chilies are right here, but I'm able to customize these what cans I want to fit where. And so I'm going to link to these exact can sorters because they are super handy. I love these. And then I've got some meat and gravies and chilies and soups down here. And so that's why I don't keep any cans upstairs in the pantry and the kitchen. And then inside this room is actually a cold room. And so I don't have a lot of canning or root veggies because we just moved into this house. And so in here, I'll start with showing you on the side. I actually have a very large, handmade dehydrator. And so I just have that sitting here in this potato bin for now. Eventually it'll probably live in the garage, and that's where I'll use it. And then sitting on top, I've got a bin right now with just very little onions in it from the garden at this house when we moved in the summer. There was those planted. And then a lot of empty canning jars just because I didn't have a lot of time to can this year because of just having moved. And then And then down here is where like a potato bin is. So we have a thermometer there, and right now I just have my canner down there and my Berkey. We do have a well with an RO system, so right now we're just keeping the Berkey for backup if in case of emergency. So, but we have used that full time at other houses depending on where we've lived. And then those are just some boxes that are specifically for my canning jars if I need to box them up for some reason. And then starting up here, and this is actually a truly cold room. So up behind those crocks, those are heavy, but I have those up there because I don't use them a ton. I do sometimes make pickles in the crocks, and so that's why I have those, or sauerkraut, which is awesome. But up there behind is one of the vents, and because it's winter now and it gets too cold, we actually have to stuff a rag in there. Otherwise, the cold room gets too cold. And then those are some inserts from my boxes, which I'll move to the corner. And then up there is seeds. We like to keep seeds up in that metal filing tin. So we have all of our seeds organized in there. And then I've got a bunch of stuff for sprouting and sprouting microgreens up there. And then the next shelf, I have some hardtack. So we've got hardtack made with some whole wheat and then also some white. We've got tallow. We like to make that ourselves. And then I've got some fermented garlic cloves in honey. So we like to use those for keeping ourselves healthy. And then the house that we did move into here had an apple tree, has an apple tree. And so my kids love apple butter, and they asked me to turn the whole thing into apple butter. And they have already eaten a lot, but we have all those jars of apple butter, which will hopefully last the winter. And then we've got pickles here. I've only got one jar of pickles left that I canned 2 summers ago because we moved and I wasn't able to can. And then the next shelf is salsa and hot sauces and jalapenos and sun-dried tomatoes, things like that. And then this is white vinegars. And I use white vinegar quite a lot because I actually use it a lot in cleaning, and I use it in my washing machine. And then also for cooking. So I have quite a bit of that. And then down here is all different types of oils that I use. And then back in the corner back there is some juices and things because we don't really drink juice at all, but I like to keep a little bit on hand just if anybody gets sick and we need that. And then also just some sparkling cider if we want to use that to celebrate anything. And then down here is some bubblies and then just some water. And then back behind this water is the vent for the cold room. And I don't know if you can see, but we have a rag stuffed in it right now just because it is winter and it gets way too cold. And then up on the next side of this, on the top, I keep light things. So I have hash browns and crackers and cereal. And I do keep a step stool in here, and I'll show you that in a second. And then here is where I keep like proteins. And I don't have a lot of protein powder right now because I'm waiting for it to go on sale again. Because at the end of the year, beginning of January, all of the health food items are usually on sale. So I'll really stock up on the protein because we use that quite a bit, especially my teenage boys. And then dried fruits are up there. And then back in that corner, just because I don't get to them a lot, is canning like lids and a little bit of applesauce in the little containers. And that's mostly I keep on hand if someone gets sick and they just need something really easy on their stomach. And then this is honeys, creamed honey and liquid honeys. And this is more baking items. So I do try to keep things, in categories. And I also have tried to put it on the shelves the best way it made sense to stack it. And so baking items. And then these are popcorn kernels. Because if we're all going to eat popcorn together at the same time, then I make it on the stove with coconut oil, and it turns out so good. And then this is now starting to get into more condiments, barbecue sauce, mayo, mustard's back there, ketchup. And I always put the newest in the left, and then we take from the right. And so I have a system of how I rotate that. So we're always, the first, the last in is the first out. And then this is more proteins. So some sardines, tuna, which tuna is kind of getting low. So I need to wait for a good sale and stock up on that again. And then canned chicken. That's handy to throw in a lot of things in good protein. And then continuing from the white vinegar is some apple cider vinegar and balsamic vinegar in the back. And then some soy sauce and And then this is more like sweet things and spreads. And so then we're getting into like the jams and the peanut butter powder and the peanut butter. And then this next shelf has all my like pasta sauce and then the Parmesan cheese that usually goes with that. And then butter chicken. And then we're back around to the juice. And then on the floor is the waters that I showed you. And then up over here, I have a step stool. It's 3 steps high because it's quite tall in here to reach the very top shelf. And I got a really good one that actually holds like 300 pounds so that, you know, my husband or my boys, they're, you know, all like bigger and taller. And then if you're also grabbing something, so I just wanted to make sure that it was safe for whoever was going to use it and also whatever you were going to load up in your arms. And then hanging there in that bag is garlic from the garden. And so then it just gets, you know, nice airflow and it's easy to just come down here and grab some. And then, like I said, I keep a few garlic cloves and a few onion bulbs upstairs in the pantry just so it's quick access. But if I can help it, I don't really chop onions too much. I love my Thrive onions. And now I'm out in the garage to show you our 2 freezers that we have out here, just because having these really helps to supplement all of the pantry items with protein. And so in this freezer is my meat freezer. And so up top here, I've got a bunch of packages of whole chickens that I got on a really good sale. So that's why I stocked up. And then I actually got that turkey for free by spending so much at a local store. And that is a bin of chicken breast that has all been cubed or flattened or, you know, packaged into how I need it for meals. And that is a couple of sleeves of hamburger patties. And that's chicken thighs and drumsticks. Down here is a big brisket because we got that on a super good sale. And my husband likes to smoke meat, and that will be several meals. And then we feed our dog raw, and so that is her dog food. And then down here in this basket is a whole bunch of 2-pound packages of hamburger. I've got hamburger really on a really great sale at Costco, so I stocked up. And then I took the time to package them myself into 2-pound bags. And that's what I did with the chicken breast as well, because I got that on a really good sale. And then in the door, I have some dog bones and some ricotta cheese. And then this is some roasts and some steaks here in the door right now. This is where the butter lives. And then down there, I've got some ice packs. And then in the other freezer, turning around to the other side here, this is where I keep freezer meals if I have any. So a lot of times that will be stacked all the way that shelf. Right now I only have 2 in there. This is an entire bin. It's still labeled chicken, but it's, after we moved, we had a bunch of zucchini here in the garden. And so I shred that up. So that is for recipes to make, mostly, you know, muffins and things that I'll throw the zucchini in. And then this is breads or buns live on there. And then this is like veggies and fruits here. And then down here on this shelf is some venison. And then in the bottom is actually some fat to render some tallow. And I think that's some heart because we like to make a beef powder. And so we actually dehydrate and make that ourselves. And this is hot dogs. We like to keep those on hands just because if the kids, you know, want to have campfire or things outside. Turkey bacon, that's some leftover cranberry sauce that I had made. It was homemade, and so I froze it to save it for the next time we want to use cranberry sauce. And also some bread cubes for doing that. More zucchini because I have so much of it. And then if I have nuts, I actually throw them in the freezer. They just last longer. These are some tomatoes out of the greenhouse that I didn't have time to do anything with. So what I did was I washed them and I threw them in this bag and I froze them. And then what I will do is actually run them out under hot water. The skin comes right off. And then I can throw them into any recipe that I want. And then some other ice packs down there. And so these freezers just help to complement the pantry items. And if you've stuck around until the end, thank you. Now let's talk about my top pantry tip, decluttering. A decluttered pantry is an absolute game changer. It keeps everything functional and stress-free. First, what you want to do is make sure that nothing that doesn't belong is taking up space. For me, the secret to keeping it decluttered is simple. Everything has a home and everything stays in its home. I found that transferring most of my pantry items into clear uniform containers is a huge help. So this way everything is the same size and nothing kind of gets lost or hidden, and it just looks so much better. And you don't want to forget to label everything. And then also, a bonus tip is to jot down the cooking times. So on this pasta, inside the lid, I put boil 9 to 10 minutes. And then on the oatmeal container, what I've done is I've actually cut off the directions from the bag, and then I've just taped it in the side. So I know exactly, and so do the kids, and my husband knows exactly how to make the oatmeal. And another thing too, if you're worried about expiration dates, you can also add those too. But honestly, for me, I use everything up pretty quickly, so it's never been an issue for me. But if you want, go ahead and include the expiration dates inside. And lastly, I have a dedicated basket here that sits on the floor of the pantry for overflow items. So for example, here's some macaroni that didn't quite fit into my clear container. So then I have a basket that I can just go ahead and put this without having to bring it back downstairs. It can just live in this basket on the floor of the pantry until I need to go ahead and put it in the container. So these small steps just keep things tidy, and it makes it super easy to see when I'm running low and I need to like restock, need to run downstairs. And then decluttering your pantry doesn't just make it look nice, it saves time, and it also reduces stress because you waste so much time looking for things. And that's the biggest thing I've saved time, is just not wasting time looking for things because it's so easy to see. And trust me, once you try it, you'll never go back. Thanks for joining me on this pantry tour. I hope you picked up some ideas to use in your own space. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. It really helps my channel grow. And if you know another mom who could use some pantry inspiration, please share this video with her. I'd also love to hear from you. What's one thing in your pantry that you can't live without? Let me know in the comments below. And also down in the video description, you'll find links to a lot of the things I showed that I use in my pantry if that would be helpful for you. And don't miss my next video. I'm actually going to be going live to answer all of your questions about meal planning, stocking your pantry, and keeping it organized. It's going to be packed with actionable tips, so make sure to tune in. And remember, simplifying family life is a journey. Let's take it one system at a time together. Until next time, keep thriving, Mama. You're doing great, and I'm cheering for you.